was generally recognised that through their charitable works they did have a broad public benefit. They weren't granted tax exemption because of any of their beliefs. Religious status in this country is not, although I don't think it should be granted or based, I do think that religious status in this country should be granted on public benefit. Currently, it seems to be granted on beliefs, practices and observances and the general group of adherents having a religion. Previously, the presumption that religious status equated to a broad public benefit to society may well have been true, but with the 1983 High Court decision, this presumption became defunct. With the judgment of the High Court decision, Justices Mason and Brennan stated, and I quote, "Charlatanism is a necessary price of religious freedom, and if a self-proclaimed teacher persuades others to believe in a religion which he propounds, lack of sincerity or integrity on his part is not incompatible with the religious character of the beliefs, practices and observances accepted by his followers." Unquote. Excuse me. There is a valid argument that religious status and tax exemption are separate issues. Religious status doesn't necessarily warrant tax exemption, as it seems to be doing in society today, in our country today. The claim that this proposed amendment is an attack on religious freedom is bogus, and to me it's an obvious attempt by some organisations with a hidden agenda, such as the Church of Scientology, to avoid tax and to avoid scrutiny. Secondly, as a former Scientologist, I believe that the Church of Scientology is a prime example why this tax amendment is required. As I outlined with detail in the attachment to my submission, the Church of Scientology is a tax-exempt organisation which, one, enjoys tax-exempt status while it only serves itself at the detriment of others. It doesn't even serve its members. Its members actually serve it. Which, two, is fraudulent. It deceives and heavily coerces its people in order to obtain so-called donations. It often doesn't deliver what is promised, and in some cases it uses those funds for purposes other than what is stated. This is fraud and it's a crime. And three, it's an organisation which threatens its people with pay up or else, and this is extortion. Due to my extensive involvement and experience with the Church of Scientology, I'm of the conviction that religious status does not warrant tax exemption. When I was a Scientologist, I didn't have any particular view on the matter. As a Scientologist who was wrapped up in a cult, I did believe that the Church of Scientology would help save mankind. However, it's because of the organisation's lack of charity and care for the individual that I finally got out of it. I couldn't abide by its ruthlessness in serving its own ends. On reflection now, I see that the Church of Scientology is the furthest thing from charitable and is completely self-serving. It's abundantly clear to me that the Church of Scientology is an organisation which looks after itself at the detriment of its members and society. It feathers its own nest and benefits only the elite of its own organisation in the USA. I wouldn't argue about its religious status, although I would argue that it uses its religious status to gain tax exemption and to stay under the radar of the law. The Church of Scientology does have some members who do give their time to contribute to charitable projects. However, they do it at their own expense and usually at the orders or coercion of others. There is and has been constant demand on Scientology staff and members to either organise or partake in activities which are done solely for the purpose of maintaining public and or religious image. I've never seen the Church of Scientology fund any of these charitable activities. They've been funded by additional donations by members, specifically obtained for that activity, not by financial resources from the Church. The Church of Scientology doesn't contribute a cent to helping anything but itself, so why should we as taxpayers essentially be subsidising it? Why should our government be granting tax exemption to any organisation which doesn't have a proven public benefit, and a public benefit which is also commensurate with its income? In closing, I can grant that religious status may have been sufficient criteria for tax exemption in the past. But the Church of Scientology is a prime example of why that should not be the case today. Thank you for your willingness to look at this information we former Scientologists have to offer, and I hope that it will be good use to you in your deliberations.
Thank you, Ms. Underwood. That's quite good evidence, because you're dealing with the issue of eligibility. So thank you. So we now throw this open to questioning. Sorry, is there a further one? I'm sorry. My apologies, Janette.
No problem. Just got to have a drink.
It's okay.
Some of the stuff I've wanted to go over involves my experience. It's very brief, so if it's inappropriate, I'm going to be stopped at any point.
So why don't you just remember the points we mentioned a few minutes ago and
Certainly.
address the terms of reference.
No problem.
We want examples which relate to eligibility, if that's what you're going to talk about.
No problem. Thank you. So I'd like to thank the committee for inviting me to speak here today regarding the inquiry into the public benefits test. The one point I wish to emphasise today is that the Australian taxpayer should not be funding systematic organised abuse. The proposed public benefit test will ensure this is no longer a concern in this country. Genuine religions and charitable organisations whose purpose it is to help will be able to continue to benefit from their tax-free status as they should. Those organisations that are currently tax-free due to their religious or charitable status that are not working for the genuine good will no longer be supported by hard-working Australians. To not have the public benefits test in place ensures that abuses such as mine and many others is unknowingly supported by the Australian taxpayer. I myself am a former member of the Church of Scientology who has spoken out not only to the media but to government officials on this subject. I was involved in Scientology from 1995 to 2007. I was 20 years old when I came into it through my boyfriend at the time. We had no children and I was working as a retail assistant. I had no desire to be involved in Scientology whatsoever, but was given an ultimatum to either get in or lose the boyfriend. So, needless to say, I got on board because he was a lovely man. I spent around 6.5 years as a staff member working for Scientology. I formally resigned in December 2007 due to my devastating experiences within this church while my husband and I were members. Some of these experiences include bullying and harassment, 2 coerced abortions, Scientology justice procedures including court hearings resulting in removal of freedoms, forced financial donations, severe financial stress, working a minimum of 40 hours up to 70 hours a week for no pay, removal of my Australian passport while studying for Scientology in the US, so I was unable to leave, working under duress all night on many occasions while my young children were forced to stay at the office and sleep on the lounge, threats of loss of my family if I try to leave, psychological abuse. I was forced to sign a suicide waiver freeing Scientology of all responsibility if I caused myself any harm when I made it clear how much I wanted to leave. Interrogations regarding my personal life and sex life. Since leaving Scientology in December 2007, I have suffered from post-traumatic stress syndrome, anxiety and depression, for which I've been seeing a psychologist every week since February this year. I'm happy to say I know I'm feeling more in control of my life, and I'm very much looking forward to moving on from my experiences of 13 years in Scientology. I do hope that this is acceptable for you to have a look at. I do have supporting documents of my claims in here, and I spent last night trying to go through these to be able to present to you. I haven't brought anything because the terminology that is used in these papers, such as my court proceedings, it wouldn't make much sense. The jargon is, it took me probably about 4 years to even understand what Scientology was talking about half the time. So to present it to you might...
You're talking about the Scientology court proceedings, in other words,
Yes.
within the Church of Scientology's own
That's
system
right.
of dealing with issues.
That's right.